This story that I'm about to share with you occurred all the way back in 2007 when I was visiting Yellowstone along with some of my friends who were also interning there at the time, hence why I came to visit. A few of them got to go on to do search and rescue, while others, whom I believe just helped maintain peace and integrity in the park. And during my visit, my friends, whom I'll keep their names anonymous, were just beginning their internship. During the time, I really knew nothing about park rangers, other than them sitting in a tower or an office all day, or boringly patrolling around the entire park, looking for mischief, or maybe teenagers who weren't doing what they were supposed to. But little did I know that it would have everything and anything to do with things that go bump in the night, or things of a more supernatural nature. I wasn't exactly camping with my friends who were interning, even though they were there with me. They had job stuff to do, so much of it involved me actually just kind of camping out by myself, while getting to hang out with them during the daytime, which was fine by me. I still had a lot of fun. But at nighttime, and keep in mind this wasn't my first camping experience, not only have I gone camping out in the woods by myself, but also in campgrounds with friends, family, and solo adventures. I have never experienced anything weird or out of the ordinary, so this whole thing was a first for me. On the very first night, I awoke to a strange light outside my tent. It was actually roughly 10 to 20 feet up in the air, right above my tent. I woke up and was very startled, thinking somebody was hanging a lantern or something. But after unzipping my tent and looking up, it appeared to be this bright orb, or what I can only describe, roughly the size of a tennis ball, just emanating a very soft, pale blue light. And just as soon as it appeared, it vanished, like somebody flicking the lights out. That definitely freaked me out. I ran back inside my tent and hid there as best I could from anything, and really didn't get that great of sleep that night. But can you blame me? So the following day, I told my friends about it, the ones who had just started interning, and they both were quiet. They didn't say much about it. These were the same kind of guys who would mock me and make fun of me had I ever brought up aliens or UFOs or anything ghost-related. To have them be this quiet was very strange. But the day and the time did go on. So, as it did, the second night came, and this time I was hoping I wouldn't see any strange balls of light. Now, at this time, I did not believe in UFOs, ghosts, or anything of that nature at all, actually. I don't know if I would have considered myself an atheist, probably more agnostic than anything. But the idea of aliens or UFOs just seemed so far-fetched. Even though I couldn't exactly explain a tennis ball-sized orb of light directly above my tent the night before, I still wasn't about to admit to alien life. And, although I told my friends, they offered no input, other than uncomfortable glances staring down at the ground, trying to avoid any sort of reply they could. This just weirded me out more than it made me feel uncomfortable. So, as I was saying, the second night came, and instead of any orbs of light, I was greeted with very strange sounds far off in the distance. It sounded like King Kong, or some sort of crazy primate, except the sounds were much, much deeper. Now, I know in Yellowstone, there are all sorts of wildlife throughout. I mean, this entire state is very popular for that. But this just sounded like nothing from what I could ever imagine hearing. There's nothing in the United States wilderness, to me, that resembles the sound of a gorilla, or any sort of primate whatsoever, especially ones with lungs that large, and a voice that deep. I wasn't sure what to make of it, but it only appeared here and there, not all throughout the night, but parts, very minimal, and only when I was awake. So nothing happened and startled me awake, thank goodness. The following day came and went, and I never discussed in any detail whatsoever about the previous night that occurred with my friends. These sounds that I heard, although strange and were a little alarming, wasn't a deal breaker for me to leave. I tried to suppress any feelings I had about these weird things happening, considering, well, they're not exactly normal. The third night, I had a pretty good night of sleep. Actually, I slept better than I have in months, it felt like. I slept like a rock, probably for around 12 hours, to be exact. The following day, same thing. Friends hung out, we did stuff just like every other day, and on the fourth night, I slept again great. Now, it was the fifth and final day and night is when stuff got a little out of hand. See, right before I turned in for the evening, a gentleman from a few campsites over came to me and said, "Hey, I don't mean to be alarming, but a little earlier, I saw a large bear, or what I thought to be a bear, walking upright, heading in your campsite's direction." I told him thank you, and I would closely be on the lookout. He walked away, and right then, I wasn't exactly sure if the Yellowstone even had grizzly bears in the area, but that he obviously had some sort of bear sighting, and I should keep my eyes peeled. Well, I never saw anything until it was time for bed. I feel it's also important, too, to make note that in Yellowstone, I was in the Madison campground, which I think is the most northern part of the campground site, and there was actually very few people in it during this week, probably because this was through a Monday and Friday, at least I can assume. There was a decent amount of people, but it was nowhere near full. In fact, I only had a few other people near my site, and by near, I mean several spots over, so I definitely had privacy. And at times during the night, this occurred to me every night, I would have to pee really bad, so I'd get up out of my tent, and instead of going to the bathrooms, I would run into the woods, which were close by, and do my business. At 2 o'clock in the morning, with nothing but a headlamp, it managed to work pretty good, because, well, you're surrounded in darkness, and nobody else around is looking for you, so it's nice. And that's exactly the perfect segue to take you into exactly what happened. I get up on the very fifth night, probably 1 in the morning, and head over to the same trees that I've been going to every other night. But this time, as I'm approaching it, something felt off, and in my sleep stupor, I never once thought about the orb of light, or the weird gorilla noises I was hearing, or just how I managed to get the best night of sleep in my life the other few nights. And instead, I felt a very familiar feeling, like I was being watched from the woods, like the direction I was going to was dangerous. The bathrooms were easily double the distance in the opposite direction, which is why I went for the woods anyway. But I just said screw it, and kept going into the woods. I only went maybe 10 feet in, and at that point, I unzipped myself, being very alert to the sounds and things around me. And even though I was still feeling watched, I couldn't exactly see a source of who was watching me. I did have my headlamp on, a one that just wraps around your head. I'm not talking about a full helmet headlamp. So I was looking around and couldn't see anything until I turned just enough to my right, and I was met with a reflection of eyes on a very large dark shape. It almost appeared to be gorilla-like, but not quite. It was man-like as well. It's really hard to tell when you're in the forest because there's brush and trees in the way, but all I saw was the eye reflection attached to a large black silhouette, the shape of a gorilla or a man, but much, much bigger. I screamed, quickly zipped up midstream, and ran back to my tent as fast as I could, unsure of what to do. Should I tell somebody? Should I try and protect myself? I wasn't sure. So I hid in my tent the rest of the night. Again, just like the first night with the orb, except this time way more terrified. Had I just seen a Bigfoot? I wasn't sure, but I had seen something. I didn't sleep at all that night either, and the morning came. I felt my adrenaline was really wearing low, and I felt exhausted. I feel like I had to call my trip quits, since this was the day I was planning on leaving anyway. I met up with my buddies, hopped up on at least 3 cups of coffee, just to try and endure my lack of sleep. I came clean and told them what I saw last night, and just like after the first night, they both went quiet, and then asked me if I could keep something on the down low. I agreed. They both pulled me aside, and they both told me that on their first couple days, they saw really weird things in the sky, orbs, triangles, strange shapes they can't identify, black, dark, huge humanoid silhouettes running through the woods, yellow glowing eyes, chasing them, running parallel, all sorts of super freaky fictionist stuff, except in their case, they were terrified when retelling it. And these dudes are dudes I went to high school with, dudes who are super serious, science diehards, the kind of guys who, as I told you earlier, would make fun of you if you ever said you knew or saw a ghost. These guys were absolutely scared, and I've never seen them so scared in my life. But I asked them, is the job worth it? They said yes, because it only happened a few times. But obviously me bringing it up made them very uncomfortable, and almost served as a reminder to them that it's a very real part of their job. Now, if we fast forward now to 2020, both of them, to my knowledge, are still working as full-time park rangers. Although with COVID, I'm not exactly sure how that's worked out for much of the environmental field of work. Maybe they're not working there anymore. I think the one stayed with Yellowstone up until at least 2020. Again, I'm assuming COVID has put a dent in things. The other one I think eventually transferred or moved states. I'm not sure. Maybe to Pennsylvania or New York. Possibly Virginia. I lost contact with him. But as far as I know, he still works as a ranger, because they both just enjoy the work, I guess. And even though there is weird things to the job, they love the sights, they love the sounds, and ultimately, they loved being immersed in nature 24/7 as a part of their occupation, even though sometimes that occupation has some very strange payoffs that you have to do. I guess the question here is, did they see the same thing I did? Because when they told me about their experiences, I didn't have much to say. I mean, conversation kind of just passed and changed subjects. But I think about it from time to time. And listening to your Bigfoot encounters and your park ranger stories always brings me back to that week. I wonder if I too saw a Sasquatch out there. I know nothing of the Bigfoot population in Yellowstone, or if that even is such a thing. And I also wonder, did my 2 friends see Bigfoots? I'm not exactly sure. I mean, for all I know, there could be a clan of them living out here. And maybe, just maybe, one was curious enough to sneak up on me that night to see what I was doing. When I said I was feeling watched, there wasn't a feeling of danger, like hostile behavior, or that I was going to die. Maybe, assuming how Bigfoots are, I was just being observed. When I shone my headlamp that night and saw the silhouette, it was probably somewhere 30 to 50 feet away, behind some trees and brush. This was June after all, which is yet another reason I was so surprised that even though during the week it was so empty compared to normal. Even my friends made that comment that they figured there'd be a lot more people, which, again, would also make sense that there wouldn't be as much activity or sightings. More people, less Bigfoot around, assuming that's what I saw. Anyway, I don't want to try and jumble all my words here. Please don't hesitate if you have any questions. I would love to get you answers as soon as I can.